The Gold Card Life membership is reserved for those who have worked to make CALLERLAB a more valuable and successful leadership organization. There have been only 21 recipients of this prestigious award in the history of CALLERLAB, of whom 10 are still living. 7 of those recipients are in attendance tonight. Each of them, in their own special way, have made a special significant contribution to CALLERLAB and to the square dancing activity in general. The 3 Gold Card recipients not in attendance tonight are Frank Lane, Jerry Helt, and Herb Egender. May I ask the 7 Gold Card recipients who are in attendance tonight to stand one at a time and remain standing as I read your name. Jim Mayo, Darrell Clendenin, John Jones, Betsy Goddard, thank you, Betsy, Mel Luttrell, Marshall Flippo, and myself, Bill Hyman. Please show your appreciation. Wow, I get 2 really, that is very emotional, sorry. It's a good thing though. Tonight's recipient started calling in 1978 when the club caller at their on-base club in the Philippines was transferred. He sent Jim Mayo a letter asking how he could go about learning to call. Jim's response congratulated him on being willing to take on the job and offered some suggestions of reading material. He also recommended that he go to a calling school if he could. A few years later, he had returned to the East Coast and came to a caller school run by Bill Peters and Jim Mayo. He was a good student and continued calling as he made the transition to civilian employment long after a career in the military. He joined CALLERLAB in 1983 and has attended our convention regularly ever since. He was elected to the Board of Governors in 1995. All of this makes him a fine caller, but not necessarily a candidate for Gold Card Life membership. In 1996, he resigned from the Board of Governors in order to accept the position of Assistant Executive Director. He was chosen by a committee made up of Tony Otzenine, Jim Mayo, and myself, Bill Hyman, who have jointly nominated him for this evening's award. It was his expectation and that of the committee that our recipient would spend a number of years as the Assistant Executive Director to George White, then Executive Director. Unfortunately, that was shortened to just 3 years when George died suddenly in 1999. A recipient tonight then became Executive Director and was thrown into a complicated and demanding transition living in Florida with an office in Minnesota. His success in making that transition and his subsequent performance as Executive Director for CALLERLAB for the next decade are the basis for our recommendation that he be recognized by being awarded the Gold Card. The position of Executive Director of CALLERLAB is, by its very definition, one that is an outstanding contribution to square dancing. It is underpaid, requires an extraordinary collection of abilities, the patience of Job, and beyond that, considerable experience as a caller. The job is not only divorced from personal gain, but requires that one consider the needs of the members way before thoughts of oneself. He has never tried to put his own gain ahead of our organization. Tonight's Gold Card recipient has all of these abilities and has made them available to CALLERLAB over more than a decade of employment, both as an assistant and as the Executive Director. When considering still living and active participants in our activity, we believe that the successful passing of the responsibility to a successor is adequate. In his case, he not only passed on a successful organization, he contributed as an assistant for another 5 years, assuring that the transition to his replacement was as smooth as it could be. We at CALLERLAB expect our executive director will at all times represent the organization even beyond his or her personal existence. We ask that our ED be at all times the most complete demonstration of leadership and professionalism that one could describe. Our recipient, again, has lived up to this standard throughout his time as our employee. Furthermore, even after leaving our employment, he continued his leadership contribution to the activity as chairman of the arts, another position that expects the extraordinary with virtually no compensation offered in return. The nature of CALLERLAB assures that our ED will exercise broad influence. The ED is our spokesperson, not by their choice, but rather by our choice. We ask they choose their words so that we are well represented. We do not allow that their actions reflect other than well on our behalf. The views of the ED are always subordinate to those of the organization, even when they are personally not in concurrence. Our recipient tonight has on many occasions had a broad influence on the difficult views of CALLERLAB, on the official views of CALLERLAB, and that assures us that his views have broadly influenced the activity in general as well. He also accepted the chairmanship of the CALLERLAB History Committee. In that position, he was a very active leader and assured that the convention session recordings were preserved in digital form and made available to all of us. He's an outstanding leader with total dedication to our activity and the ability to lead others in the best interests of square dancing. He deserved to be recognized with the Gold Card Life membership. Not knowing that he was to be honored tonight, our recipient stated to me earlier today that, quote, "This job is the best job I ever had," unquote. Please join me presenting this award to everybody's friend, Mr. Jerry Reed.
Do I know you?
Just trying to pick you up.
Shauna?
Congratulations.
Talk about surprises, huh?
Take your time.
As I've heard some of the young people say, OMG. Good night. Good night. As Bill said, those 10 years, that job that I had for those 10 years was the best, absolutely best job of my life. And every minute was a pleasure, and we've made so many friends and been able to do so much traveling while Dell and I have been together. This year, we celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary. I hope you'll excuse me if I ramble. Every time I have come before you to tell you something or to say something, I have always had a script. All I had to do was read it. Dana did not present me with a script. I gotta tell you, I really don't know what to say, really. And as Bill said, I learned to call in the Philippines, wanted to learn to call in the Philippines rather isolated from the square dance activity. We had a small little club, and I had ordered Jim Mayo's books, had his address, so I wrote him a letter. And I said, I'm in the Philippines, need some help. How do I learn to call? And Jim responded with an absolute wonderful letter, which I still have framed and posted above my desk. And I do thank Jim for that. When I wrote that letter, I had absolutely no idea that some 20-some years later, I would have the privilege to present him with a Gold Card Award. During the 10 years that I was executive director, many Saturdays, many Sundays, I was in the office or doing this or that. And at no time did Del ever say, you need to stop doing this. Absolutely the greatest support I've ever had in my life. Thank you very much.
Now, I just went blank. But that was, when he first started that, the executive director, we were traveling in our motorhome, and we were doing our hookups to the internet, where you had to go sit in a little office somewhere. And the very first thing that would happen almost every single time was that some equipment would crash, and it would be this major problem with the internet. And it was just predictable. But Jerry has loved this job. Jerry has come alive. Jerry comes alive at CALLERLAB. I always said that. And it's just been wonderful for us. Thank you so much.